The Willamette Valley is a broad stretch of fertile agricultural land in northwestern Oregon, forming the basin of the Willamette River, bounded by the Oregon Coast Range on the west and Cascades on the east. It begins from the Kalapuya Mountains near Eugene and runs 200 miles northward up to its confluence with the Columbia River in Portland. The westward expansion of the United States in the 1800s brought different peoples to the shores of America. Filipinos were among them. Having sailed the vast Pacific Ocean, they landed in the populated regions of Hawaii and the West Coast in what is considered the first wave of Filipino migration to the United States. It crested during the years following the end of the Spanish-American War in 1898, in which the Philippine Islands were sold to the United States for $20 million. Filipinos instantly became American nationals. They could come to America without passports or visas. Thousands of Filipinos sailed to America between 1898 and July 4, 1946, the year the U.S. ended its Commonwealth in the Philippines, granting its independence. Beginning in 1903, the American territorial government started sponsoring Filipinos to study in the USA. They were mostly male, from well-connected families and adventurous. They started enrolling at the Oregon Agricultural College in Corvallis and the Oregon College of Literature, Science, the Arts and Humanities in Eugene, among other schools. At the same time, Filipinos worked in agriculture. At the heart of the Willamette Valley lie the places that pioneers called home. The flat terrain invited widespread agriculture, and many Filipinos already in Hawaii came to the West Coast to find better working and living conditions. They belonged to a farm crew being shuttled from one camp to another, and ended up working in the cherry orchards and hops farms of Salem and surrounding towns in the valley. Between the early workforce and the elite government scholars, Filipino migration continued to surge into the later waves. Service workers like houseboys, waiters, cooks and bartenders began arriving in the 1920s and 30s. The decision to stay during the harsh economic times forced them to look for mates, preferably Filipina. But they were hard to come by, for in the 1930s, the Filipino male-to-female ratio was 14-1. Filipino men had to socialize, and sometimes illicitly, with women of other ethnic stock, including Caucasians and Europeans.
And this is another interesting photograph because it shows how Filipinos during those years in 1936 celebrate a party. And you would never think that they're houseboy, busboys, because they really dressed up. And also during those years, they have dates white women.
The main deterrents of Filipinos and other ethnic men consorting with white men were the anti-miscegenation laws passed in 26 states. These laws forced interracial marriage couples to travel to free states. Filipino communities grew out of necessity. Wherever there were Filipinos, it became a gathering place. Several community and fraternal organizations had existed in the 1920s among friends, as well as those from the same hometown or province. The first registered group in Oregon, is the Filipino-American Association of Portland and Vicinity. The association was the brainchild of Vincent Perlas and several friends, and he was elected its first president. Meetings were held at members' homes, but with enough initial capital in 1971, the group secured a bank loan to purchase property in Southeast Portland as their headquarters. By the 1960s, the Filipino population was beginning to boom, reflective of the nationwide influx brought about by the new immigration law passed in 1965. What FANHS considers the current fourth wave of Filipino migration begins from 1965. This time, a new class of immigrants came. Educated and highly desired professionals, especially doctors, nurses, engineers, created a boom of immigrants to America on the one hand, and a problematic brain drain for the country of origin on the other.
1965 is a key, like a landmark point in time, because the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 was passed at the federal level, which opened the gates to allow more Filipinos, I believe it was about 20,000 a year, to come into this country with basically relaxed guidelines.
They started coming, all professionals, doctors, nurses, accountants, engineers, lawyers. They were in a different preference category from family-based immigrants. Everyone already in America had a family to petition. Other entry categories were available as well. Political asylum seekers, business investors, students, fiancés, and of course, tourists. 50 years later, the Philam Center, as the building is now called, still serves the community. The growth in numbers of Filipino community members necessitated those residing in outlying areas to form their own groups. Through the years, both the association and the building have been host and witness to countless stories, activities, as well as personal and public milestones of Filipinos in Oregon and the Willamette Valley. By the 1980s, the Filipino communities in the valley have become multi-generational. The pioneers who came in the 1930s and 40s were now outnumbered by recent immigrants. The era of goal-specific organizations began in 1986 when the Filipino-American National Historical Society, or FANHS, pitched the creation of an Oregon chapter. Over a decade ago, heads of several Philam organizations started meeting and immediately got the overall feeling that although there are many organizations, they are one community. Such a community coming together is the story of CFAA, Council of Filipino-American Associations, broad enough to encompass the state of Oregon and southwestern Washington. What began in 1997 as an attempt to honor Philippine President Corazon Aquino snowballed into a coordinating body of community leaders with the various associations on board as affiliates.
The group then decided to still go ahead with a another umbrella organization of all the different Phil-Am groups.
After years of work by a preparatory committee, an umbrella organization was established at a convention in December 1999 in Salem. It registered with the state of Oregon as the Council of Filipino American Associations, or CFAA. In the ensuing years, quarterly meetings were hosted by the affiliates, often becoming venues for networking among members of the community. At one point, there were as many as 25 affiliated organizations. The affiliates are fully autonomous, but cooperate and collaborate with each other, allowing for the pooling of resources and always on the lookout for opportunities that benefit the entire community. Today, the CFAA encompasses the Willamette Valley and beyond.